Welcome in, College Football Smothered and Covered, Day 3 here in Dallas at the Omni SEC Media Days, of course, sometimes referred to as a circus because of all the fans in the lobby. Did not see that for Alabama Day this morning. It was empty. Go look at my Twitter account, my X account. I took a picture of nothing. Very big departure from what we've seen. Alabama's Day is still big, obviously, because Karen DeBoer spoke to the media, essentially his debut to the masses. And of course, it's Texas Day as well, which is interesting. They put Alabama and Texas on the same day. But of course, a big story with the Longhorns coming in to the SEC. The show brought to you by Bet Online. Go to Bet Online, get live lines, odds, everything you need in terms of sports news, stats. They have everything over there. Hey, when you're done, go to the online casino. Play a little blackjack, play a little poker. We partake in one of their 150 slot options. Use promo code BELIEVE, B-L-E-A-V. That's B-L-E-A-V. And they'll match $50 up to your first deposit of up to $250. Bet Online, the game starts here. And of course, it is Bama Day. And one thing I noticed about the Crimson Tide is that Karen DeBoer is like a more pleasant-sounding Nick Saban. He's nice. He seems very approachable. But he doesn't say a damn thing. He does not say a damn thing. It is coach speak nonstop. Now, I do think he was asked in the big room about integrating himself into the state of Alabama in terms of what football means. And I think he had that answer canned, and I think he had it canned very, very well. He basically said, I'm always learning about what's going on, always educating myself as to what it means in different areas of the state, historic parts of the state, success or failures in certain parts of the state. So that's a level of self-awareness that I think he has to have. So it was nice to see that. It was also nice to see him compliment Jalen Milroe. He said that Jalen Milroe is always the first one in the complex and that people try to beat him in the complex, and sometimes they don't. But I think for Alabama on the field this year, he didn't give you an awful lot because I don't think there is an awful lot to say. If you listen to the show, you've heard me on SiriusXM, you've seen what I've written. Anybody who has a definitive take on Alabama this year is a liar. There's no blueprint for any of this, none. You have no idea what is happening in Alabama this year. I think the expectations need to be reset, and Alabama should maybe return to a 10-2, 11-1 team that can make the playoff and can win the playoff. But expecting perfection every year is just not going to happen. And that's why I've said consistently that Alabama fans need to give Karen DeBoer a mulligan to an extent if it's a 9-3 season. Because a 9-3 season for this Alabama team, considering all the losses, considering the coaching transition, that's perfectly fine. I think moving forward every single season, beyond this year, yeah, it's playoff or bust. But this year, if you're in the conversation as you head to mid-November, I think that's fine. To win a national championship, you have to have a lot of luck. Alabama has had a lot of luck. Everybody has had a lot of luck when it comes to winning a national championship. But I think right now, calm down a little bit and let's see where the chips fall. Let's see how Karen DeBoer handles this. It's a big, big, big change. And like I said, there's no blueprint for this. None. No blueprint. Now, I think on the field this year, there are some issues. And Kalen mentioned this in his press conference, that Jalen did a great job taking the top off of defense. And he did. That's the truth. That's what he excelled at. They didn't have an offensive line last year in Alabama. Washington's offensive line won the Joe Moore Award. So I think you can extrapolate a little bit that, you know what, some of that success comes to Tuscaloosa. You might be talking about an Alabama team that's elite. But I think the biggest thing with Jalen Milroe is that he held on to the ball just a tick too long. Consistently, just a little bit too long. I think he can fix that. I don't know that he can fix that. From what I've seen from Jalen, a lot of that had to do with that he didn't get a clean snap ever. Had no chance to have a clean snap. So I like the way Alabama handled itself. I like the way Karen DeBoer handled himself. I just think with this team, you need to step back a little bit. You need to kind of recalibrate, readjust what your expectations are, and then see what this team is capable of. All right, he is Ryan Fowler, Tide 100.9. I go on your show every week, and your callers get mad at me if I say anything that's against Alabama.
Yeah, we put you in the penalty box every now and then.
So, now it's time for you to say something bad about Alabama.
Bad about
What's
Alabama.
the biggest problem? Let's put it this way.
Okay, on the X's and O's standpoint?
What's the problem that you think cannot be solved?
Wow. Now, I don't think there's a problem that cannot be solved. But here's my thing, okay? If you're saying biggest question on this football team, to me it's got to be corner. And it's got to be both. I mean, Dominic Jackson's going to bring, solid over there. He played in the Pac-12. You would hope that would be. It's the opposite corner. But really in that 4-2-5, you're going to have two more guys. Who are those guys? Can they go youth and get by with it? They love to be able to blitz. They love to be able to put pressure on the quarterback. Where's that pressure going to come from?
Sure.
That's another gigantic question. So if you're ranking like big to, from biggest down to smallest, cornerback to me, safety, I think they're going to be very good at safety. I think with Keon Sabb and Malachi Moore, which we got a chance to listen to today.
And Malachi was great.
Yeah,
in the big room, he was great.
Yeah, he was great just about everywhere. So you can tell that leadership is really stepping up for him. I'm worried about corner, and I'm worried about pressure. Defensive line, to me, what makes a great defensive line is all about depth.
Yeah.
They've got about 8-9 guys that can play, they can rotate.
Yeah.
LT Overton's a name that you want to watch, and I finally think that
Milton High School, LT Overton.
Jaheim Otis is a guy that can also really, from a health standpoint, I think he's probably in his best position right now from a health standpoint. He battled injuries the last couple of years, and this is the money year for the contract side of things. If he goes to the NFL, that would be a one that you kind of keep an eye on. I think they've got enough depth. It's where can they get pressure other than the defensive line? The 4-2-5, where's the heat coming from? Because if you don't have heat and you also don't have lockdown corners, that's not a winning combination on the defensive side of the football. Now, if you can have one, it can help the other out. But right now, like if you could put Dallas Turner and Chris Braswell back on that team and to help these young corners, it would be a big luxury. They don't have that.
So what you're saying is that Alabama defense is a train wreck. They will give up 45 points a game.
No.
That's what Ryan said. That's what
Ryan
said. That's what he said. Y'all heard it.
I did
Y'all
not
heard
say
it.
that. And, I realize how much of a face I've got for radio. I mean, I'm a true radio face. I mean, see, like you're clean shaving. You look good.
I'm really not. See, I got sick of the bald head.
Okay.
I like it, but
I with the hat. Okay.
I wear hats anyway, all the time.
I mean, so does Karen DeBoer, so you'll be perfect.
I'm not professional. Like I wear hats with suits.
Okay.
Well, I'm not professional at all, but
I think this defense. Okay, and let's take LSU for example.
Sure.
Okay, LSU gave you the sample size that you can be number one in offense and you can be just so-so in defense.
Number 4,000.
Yeah, 108th in defense and show you that you cannot win at a level. Now, we do have the 12-team playoff, which will be a different sample size, but I think we also back up and you say, all right.
If you're middle of the pack defensively, you're probably okay.
You and I talked about this on my show. If LSU's in the 30s, they probably win a national title.
I agree.
They just needed something.
And they didn't have anything.
So that kind of gives you a sample size. Alabama's offense should be elite.
Yeah.
It's the defensive side of the football. Can they give you enough for that offense to be able to get the knockout punch? That's my biggest question.
I agree with you. Now, we heard Kalen in the big room. He was asked about how he replicates his offense at Washington with Jalen Milroe, because there are a lot of similarities. Jalen Milroe was successful deep downfield. That's where he thrived. You look at Michael Penix Jr. with all three of those absolute studs at wide receiver. That's how they got to the national championship game. The offensive line at Alabama has been atrocious the last few years. Washington's won the Joe Moore Award last year. But he was asked about Jalen Milroe. And I'm looking at them going, okay, yeah, Jalen can complete passes downfield. He does not have those receivers. Nobody does. How does that change? I'm not asking Alabama to go out there and get those three dudes that Washington had last year. Can they find one and a half to take pressure off of Jalen just a little bit?
Yeah, and even last year, I think they're going to be upgraded in wide receivers. I think Jeremy Bernard is going to be a guy that is going to be probably going to lead this team in receiver yards, probably receptions. I think he's going to be the go-to guy. Keep your eye on Kendrick Lamar.
Okay.
And I know EA put him as a high-graded player, but his speed is off the charts. But he's a guy that looks like he played linebacker.
Sure.
It almost reminds you of what is the is it Deebo Samuel at San Francisco? That bigger, thicker wide receiver
that plays running back.
Yeah. He kind of
Ty Montgomery at Stanford did that with the Packers too.
Yeah, he almost reminds you of that big physical guy, but he can absolutely fly. Watch him. Okay, that's another one. And then I asked Kalen earlier during my interview with him, how quick can Ryan Williams be ready to go? Because they feel like that they can get this guy. I mean, this guy should be playing senior high school football.
Yeah.
Instead, he's going to be playing in the SEC. But let me say this: from a 7-on-7 camp, he's already turned a lot of heads. If you get a chance to talk to Malachi Moore, ask him what's it like to defend Ryan Williams. They're already finding out that
not good.
And skill guys,
not easy.
Skill guys can make quicker impacts than like trenches guys, defensive line, offensive line, linebackers. Guys that like that. So the wide receiver, I think you're going to be an upgraded there. I think they're upgraded in the running backs. I think when you look at Alabama last year, they were just kind of average.
Yeah.
They really were not better than any of Nick Saban's previous running backs. They were
because they didn't have that dude. That dude.
No. And Justice Haynes and Jam Miller can be that dude.
Yeah. I'm excited to see that because you look at Washington last year. I don't think people realize how much Dillon was part of that offense. I mean, everyone looked at Michael Penix and were like, they actually ran the ball a lot. And I'll say this: in that title game when Dillon got hurt, that changed the entire game. Washington might have been the best team in college football. I still think Georgia was better. I still think Alabama was better. I still think Michigan was better. But Washington had a chance to be the best team that night had the running game not basically gone away in the first quarter.
And you touched on the offensive line. Guys, that's a problem. I mean, it was a problem with it.
Dude, your listeners hated me for 3 years because I kept saying that.
And really, it's been a bad run, right?
But at the end of that run, they were like, you're right.
Last year, like 2 years ago, that was bad. I mean, that 1 year sample size, and really they missed on some evaluations and recruiting, and it kind of caught up to them, right? That's why it was a point of emphasis of going out and finding some guys. They got lucky with Caden Proctor because if he doesn't come back, I don't know what they do at left. Because I didn't see anything from Elijah Pritchett in the spring game that makes me feel like, hey, I can be that left tackle in the SEC. And really, that's another competition. You feel great about the guards. You feel great about Parker Brailsford at the center. You feel great about Caden Proctor because these guys have all lost weight. But then on the fifth side of that, who's going to be that right tackle? Do you flip Elijah Pritchett from left to right? Or does Wilkin Formby, which is a guy that has grabbed out my attention and been a very big-time leader, and how much they trust him because he's basically now being, a second-year player. He's the official visit guy.
Yeah.
And he's a guy that's been a big-time help with him in the recruiting side. So Wilkins' leadership is already showing up. That may be a guy at that right tackle spot that could be a guy that could slip in, maybe an under guy and could win that job. Offensive line, 49 sacks. That's embarrassing.
It really is.
And really, take Milrose's mobility out of it. Okay, what if he's not a mobile quarterback? Could they get to 65 sacks? I mean, could
Alabama finish 8-4?
Well,
probably.
From
with
last year,
yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean, but I think they could have had 60 sacks. I really do. I mean, 60 sacks. I know that sounds crazy, but that team was awful on protecting the quarterback.
It was.
And so this offensive line, and I talked to Coach Cap a couple of weeks ago. Coming in, you can see the mindset is different on that offensive line. For one, they're making them all like trimmed down a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, like Caden Proctor, I would love to know what he played at last year because I'm going to take a wild guess that it was probably about 385. I mean, it was too big. I mean, it was the biggest offensive line in football, NFL or college, and it was too big. It was too big. You heard earlier Tyler Booker talking about, I'm down to 330. I played at 355 last year.
That's crazy.
So I think that's going to help.
And
this
they weren't
offensive
athletic.
line.
They were slower. Think about this. We're talking about Alabama being slow.
They were.
That should not happen.
Like, I don't know whose ideal it was. Hey, let's fatten these guys up. Let's get them up to 370, and we're going to go. I mean, but they averaged over 340 as a unit. Parker Brailsford's going to skew that number because he's a smaller center.
Right.
But I think they're probably
Can he snap?
Oh, yeah.
That's good.
Well,
That's job one.
He was a freshman All-American. He was a finalist for that Sean Alexander Freshman of the Year award. So Parker Brailsford is a guy that can, he had some issues he was dealing with in the spring, maybe a little bit of adjustment issue coming from UW down to Tuscaloosa. But I think not Seth McLaughlin, but James Brockemeyer, when he left, I think he saw the writing on the wall.
Yeah.
That this was Parker Brailsford's job.
All right, last thing. My opinion, and I've said this on your show, I've said this on this show early in the show, that Alabama should be in the playoff every year. Or, look, on a bad year, missing out barely. Like, that should be what the floor is for Alabama, except this year. I think 9-3, if the three are close, should be tolerable. It should not be acceptable moving forward, but it's tolerable this year because there's no blueprint. There's no blueprint for this.
But that's that's college football. I mean, we don't know what it takes. We don't know how many teams you can get in. I think this team's a playoff team. I'm not saying they're a national championship team.
I think that's fair.
I think they're a playoff team.
They're not good enough to win the national championship.
I don't think they are.
But here's the thing, and this is what...
That's your clip right there. Fowler says that they're not good enough to win the national title.
Look in the camera and say it.
I don't think they're good enough to win the national title.
Other camera.
I don't think they're good enough to win the national title. And I will eat crow, but I'll say this. I think this team is going to shock some teams. And who knows? Because what I'm basing this on is what I think is going to happen in the the 12 team. Like, we don't really know. Because what if you get there, let's say you backdoor it, and somehow you make it through, the first round quarterfinal game, and you run up against a team that has an injury.
On the road, though, maybe. Here's the thing and this is for anybody in the SEC, but let's just say there are 3 or 4 teams that are in contention every single season. I think the SEC is going to get 3 in every year. I think that 4th team, and I think Alabama's that 4th team this year, you are watching that landscape all season long. If a second group of 5 team goes undefeated, if, like this year, if Miami and Clemson or Florida State and Clemson are good, really good. Like, you can't have, if you're the 4th team in the SEC, you can't have the ACC gobbling up 3. You can't have 2 undefeated group of 5 teams. Like, there are so many moving parts to this entire process. And look, I hate the fact that we're at 12. I didn't like 4. I wish we could go back to 2, but I've conceded that election, right? I think with what's interesting now is that we have absolutely no clue how to approach this. We have to pick the playoff, right? I have no freaking clue.
No, I don't.
I have no clue.
Because it's
the back end is like just roll some dice.
Right. Roll some dice. That's why, I know I said that, but what if Alabama shocks the world? What if Alabama beats Georgia September the 28th? Because if you look at it from an Alabama perspective, let's say you flip the roles. Alabama's defense and Georgia's defense under Nick Saban and Kirby Smart were very similar. They ran a lot of the same concepts. Okay, I would say this, and you saw this in the SEC title game. The offense that Alabama's going to run is the offense that would have given Alabama's defense and Georgia's defense fits.
Yes.
And you saw that in the SEC title game. Alabama always struggled with mobile quarterbacks who could extend the play. And really, they probably never played anybody as fast as Jalen Milroe.
Yeah.
So that's why you're seeing Georgia. What if they do come to Tuscaloosa and they struggle? What if they come and happen to slip up and get beat? Does Georgia fans look at it and go, man, can we ever get over this Alabama hump? I mean, it's truly, Superman's kryptonite is trying to beat the Alabama Crimson Tide. And I know those dog fans, but who knows, man? Alabama could play Georgia 3 times.
3 times.
Yeah. So.
Winning 3 against anybody is not going to happen. I don't care which teams there are. If you play the same team 3 times in a season, you ain't winning every single one.
So set it up like that. What if Georgia comes to Tuscaloosa, they beat Alabama?
Okay.
You get them again somewhere.
In the SEC championship game.
Or even in the playoffs.
Or both.
Then maybe the advantage swings back to Alabama. I mean, it's
well,
just,
we have no. That's what's interesting. We have no clue.
There is just tons and tons to talk about from these different angles because it's the uncertainty that kind of creates some fun conversation.
Yep. Ryan, appreciate it.
Always.
Tell people where you can get your stuff.
So we don't allow Auburn people to listen to our show because we speak the truth. Okay. So Auburn people, I don't know, they have internet in Lee County. I don't know, maybe, but download the Tide 100.9 app. We only cover Auburn when it's a negative story. Okay, so it's if a
I can confirm.
Yeah, if it's a negative story, we cover it. If it's a positive story, we let somebody else cover it. We have a lot of calls. Believe it or not, we have Texas Longhorns that have now started calling into Tuscaloosa radio.
I'm not surprised.
And they're wanting to tell me that I'm living rent-free or they're living rent-free in my head. I'm like, I'm not calling Austin radio. You're calling Tuscaloosa radio where we, 99% is Alabama, 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 Alabama. So Tide at 100.9 is the website, tide109.com. The app is a free download. We talk college football from 2 until 6 every day. And we're a caller-friendly show. We like to have a little smack talk. And when you do call in, I like when I don't have a co-host. And when someone calls in, they're my co-host for 4 to 5 minutes.
Sure.
And so I take calls, and I really take some really good calls. I mean, people that bring stuff out that I really wasn't thinking about. So I really enjoy the interaction with callers. So if you're out there and you love Sports Talk Radio, check us out. And I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, man.
Thank you, man. Always. Thank you, guys.
All right, let's talk about Texas. Let's talk a little bit about the Texas Longhorns. I have said that I think they can win the SEC. I've said that they're capable of winning a national championship. I think with this Texas team, when we submit our ballots, and we got them in email form last night, I will pick Texas to go undefeated in the regular season. I think they win in Austin against Georgia, and then Georgia gets revenge in Atlanta. The one question with Texas is one thing that we've seen consistently in the SEC that you have to win with is that defensive line depth. You need to have 8 or 9 guys. They don't have that, but I think Sark has done a great job recruiting, developing talent. I think they can get that. That's why fall camp is so important. Beyond that, I think they're fine. Great running back core, C.J. Mosley. Fantastic wide receiver in Isaiah Bond. Mari Niblack at tight end. This team is ready to go. But Texas fans, y'all need to chill out. You are not the hottest thing since sliced bread. Texas fans need to chill. They're not going to come in here and run the conference. They're going to be part of it. I think Alabama, Georgia, Texas, all can be elite programs. But that's it, and that's fine, And this particular year, you're going to have a quarterback with weapons, with a good scheme, and experience in the SEC, because we've seen it. We saw Texas go into Alabama and win after being down 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. I'm sorry, winning by 2 touchdowns after being down in the fourth quarter. Texas is capable of doing that. But there's no reason to bring the arrogance that we've seen this week in Dallas. Joined now by my good friend. He bailed on us. No longer loves us. He is Dan Mathews of 790 in Houston. Back home, I get it, you're back home.
Right.
But it's no fun. Like, all my friends are at 680. Now I go in there for like a pregame party for the Braves, and I'm like, where the hell's Dan?
Yeah, I mean, I still love you. I mean, the love is.
There are others that you don't.
The love is not lost. No, I mean, it was a great time in Atlanta, but like you said, the dinner bell rang and I had to come home.
Houston's okay, but now we're in Dallas.
Yeah, well,
I like Houston better than Dallas.
Yeah, no, I mean, Houston's great. It's got a wide amount of talent in Houston. But no, it's a great place, and a lot of SEC coaches like to come through Houston.
So, the Texas Longhorns are here today. If you talk to media members around here, it seems like they've been here for the last 3 days because
Right.
Texas people love talking about Texas.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So, I guess first things first. How do you think that the attitude that exists among the fan base and within the administration impacts the SEC? Like, how will that play? Because you've been around the SEC.
Sure.
You've been there for Atlanta for what, 6, 7 years, 8 years?
Yeah.
So you know all about this. But how do you think that mindset is gonna play?
Well, I think it's going to work twofold. I think number one with Texas, they more than Oklahoma, I feel like don't really understand what they're signing up for fan-wise, because you know as well as anybody, I know as well as anybody, that this isn't just a September through January thing.
No.
This is September until the next September. And the SEC is on Twitter at all times. It's on social media at all times. The memes are always there. And the trash talking is always there. So I think there's that. But I think it's also, too, you've known as well as anybody from covering the sport for a long time that Texas loves Texas. And
Very much so.
Yes. So,
Very much so.
you know, they feel like in Austin that, you know, I mean, their whole tagline is as arrogant as can be. What starts here changes the world. So, you know, I mean, that's
It really doesn't.
No, I mean, but in Austin they feel like it does, and all throughout the state they feel like it does. You know, they feel like they're the New York Yankees, they're the New England Patriots, they are the Boston Celtics, the Lakers. I mean, that's the way that they feel about themselves. So it's also, too, not lost on me. I mean, Nick Saban had the line that there's a lot of arrogance in the SEC, and he's not wrong. I mean,
a little bit.
Yeah,
a little bit.
There's arrogance in Tuscaloosa. There's arrogance in Baton Rouge.
Tuscaloosa?
Yeah, I mean,
No way.
there's arrogance in Athens and in Knoxville. I mean, of, you know, feeling like not only are we part of this, but we're also part of the schools that can win this thing. So, you know, we're walking out there very proud and feeling like we've got something to work with here.
Do they have something to work with? Because to me, I look at Texas and I'm like, that's a team that can win a national championship. And that's
Sure.
not really going out on a limb, because they were, 15 yards from going to a national championship game last year? So,
Right.
But to me, I'm buying Texas in terms of, okay, yes, they can compete this year. They're going to be able to compete every single year.
Right.
Are they going to be Alabama from the 2010s? No. Are they going to be Georgia right now? I don't know. Probably
Right.
not.
Right.
But they can, with this landscape, it can be Georgia, Texas, Alabama, and whoever else pops on a pretty consistent basis.
Well, I mean, they've definitely got the talent. I don't think there's any doubt about that, either through what they've signed out of high school or what they've garnered through the transfer portal. There's no doubt about that. But the question that I have, I think, is twofold for Texas. Number one, why do you necessarily feel like the success from last year is going to translate when you've lost so many players? You lost basically your entire wide receiver room, and I get it. They went out and got Isaiah Bond. They went out and got Amari Niblack. You know, you got some good players in the transfer portal. That's not lost on me. But you got to replace Jordan Whittington. You got to replace Xavier Worthy. You got to replace A.D. Mitchell. You got to replace J.T. Sanders. I mean, that's 4 names that I've given you right there, and I hadn't even talked about Byron Murphy and also Devondre Sweat on the defensive line.
Right, and that's where you need to win, be like 9 deep in the SEC.
No, 1,000%. And, you know, and I think the second part of that question is you won 11 games last year, or 12 games, obviously, with winning the Big 12, but, you know, you get my point there. Aside from really the Big 12 championship and maybe the Alabama game, they barely got out of there with a win against Kansas State.
Yeah, well, Kansas State was good.
I get it, but
except at quarter, my Will Howard hate is
right. But I mean, I get it. But I mean, the point is like, credit for winning those games, but you also had to sweat out a lot of those games. I mean, you had to get out of Fort Worth against a TCU team, which honestly, here's the thing too. You know, I've been known as, if this is possible, both a Texas and Texas A&M hater.
Oh, I get that.
That's good to have, I guess.
I'm an Alabama and Auburn hater.
Right,
I freaking went
there
to
you
Auburn.
go. Well, you're also a huge Georgia homer, as we know from Twitter. So, you know, but I mean, that can't be underscored. I mean, because there's a lot of these games that they're going to have that you're going to go on the road to a place that's tougher to win at than TCU.
Yeah.
You're going to have a back-to-back of Oklahoma and Texas there in the middle of October. That's not going to be easy.
Yeah.
So, like, you know, just to think that, you know, this is going to be an immediate transition and, oh, yeah, hey, you know, tell us how great Texas is. The burden of proof's on you because we've seen.
Go show me.
Absolutely. I mean, we've seen Georgia be able to lose talent and be able to come back and be just as good, maybe even better. We saw it for years with Nick Saban in Alabama. Now we're going to have to try to see what happens with Alabama under Karen DeBoer.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of the same deal with Texas. We've seen plenty of one-hit wonders. I mean, you brought up LSU. Yeah, I mean, you know, I'm an LSU guy, but the last 2 times they've won national championships, it's been a precipitous drop-off the following
You trying to
year.
say Ed Orgeron could not sustain success.
Well, I mean, I guess Les Miles too, So I mean,
Les Miles.
yeah. So I mean,
Don't get me started on that, dude.
That's part of it with Texas.
So everyone's talking about Quinn. We had Carson Beck yesterday. I had a great interview with Carson Beck. The audio and video did not work.
Hey,
still good conversation.
Welcome to SEC Media
Right,
Days.
still good conversation. Can't upload anything either, but that's a different problem. Conversation, like Carson Beck and Quinn Ewers, they're one at A and one B, and I mean they're throwing Dylan Gabriel in the Heisman conversation, but I mean whatever.
Sure.
Quinn, to me, has that mindset of IDGAF, like I'm just going to go out there and do my thing.
Right.
I'm just going to play ball. Yeah, he knows he's the front-facing player on the team. He's a quarterback, whatever. But he just wants to go out there and ball. To me, that makes it much easier to sustain success. Because Steve's never been in this position either. Sarkisian's never been in a situation where he has to sustain success.
Right.
Having a quarterback like Quinn, to me, makes it much easier because he's essentially doing Sark's job for him to an extent.
No, I mean, and look, it's the old saying, and you try to avoid all the cliches that are in sports, but sometimes it's impossible. The quarterback
taking it one game at a time.
Right? Yeah, there you go. It's a
Focus
huge.
On the process.
It's a huge game because it's the next game. God, let me tell you this before I get to my point. Whenever a player or a coach says that, I hope you lose that week.
But here's the thing:
it's the worst.
Before we get
sidetracked,
but it's actually true.
Oh my God!
It's actually true. It is true, Dan. Come on.
No, stop it. I mean,
it is.
No, it's ridiculous. I mean, it's you're trying to tell me, playing against Louisiana Monroe is as huge as playing against.
For college kids, no. For NFL players, sure.
Okay, well, I mean, that's valid. I get that, but I mean, but that's the case with Quinn. I mean, the good news with him, he's got Kelvin Banks Jr. back. And for everything that I just talked about with the offensive line, here's where I get you back, Texas fans. You've got 4 out of the 5 starters back. And I just mentioned Banks Jr.
Yeah.
That's huge. He's going to be a huge NFL
number one
draft
pick.
pick.
Not one of them. First round pick,
right,
I think, without a doubt.
Yeah, I mean, it could be the first offensive tackle taken in next year's draft.
Yeah,
so you've got that working for you. But the other part of it as well, and here's a huge but, can he stay healthy?
Yeah.
I mean, because what do we know about Quinn Ewers? Both years, he's had some sort of injury that's knocked him out for either in his first year an extended period of time or last year a couple of games. But, people wondering, is Arch Manning going to play this year? I'd say the chances are pretty high.
Yeah.
Because unless Quinn can stay on the field, who's next in line? It's Arch.
Yeah. Speaking of Arch, I feel like we have to get him in for search engine optimization purposes. Like you put Arch Manning in anything and it's just...
Yeah. I mean, he's the new age Jacob Eason. I mean, where Georgia fans thought for sure, once Jacob Eason gets here, all of our quarterback troubles
Johnny
are
Manziel,
gone.
too.
Right, absolutely.
Johnny Manziel has breakfast. Ooh,
but
really?
you know as well as anybody that there's 2 things that are really good to be as a quarterback. Number 1, highly rated. Number 2, never of taking a meaningful snap.
That is
because
very helpful.
Once you take a meaningful snap, then it's completely, he didn't do this, he didn't do that. Yeah, he threw for 4 touchdowns, but he had those 2 incompletions. It's stuff like that that Arch is not going to be immune to. I mean, it's going to be finally to a point of, he's a Manning, but God, he sucks on the field. I mean, that is going to come out. We know how Twitter is.
Yes.
The
first incomplete pass.
The 3 most thankless jobs in sports are Major League Baseball manager, offensive coordinator, both in the NFL and in college, and also quarterback, because there's really nothing you can do that's right.
No, not a thing. I'm of the belief that he's just kind of okay, and if his name was Arch Smith, he'd be a guy.
Right.
A pretty good guy. Probably a starter.
Yeah.
But
a little bit better than Bronny James, though.
Hey, now we're in search engine optimization.
There you go. See, that's why you brought me on.
Yes, exactly. Dan Mathews talks Bronny James, Arch Manning, and Johnny Manziel.
There you go.
So,
it clicks for days.
Okay, so ultimately, where are you picking Texas?
I mean, I understand that they're the hot pick to get to Atlanta this year, but I think Ole Miss is really good. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't think LSU is getting enough credit.
I don't either.
I think LSU is
and the schedule's helpful.
No, absolutely it is. And I've seen some people, and look, it's not a shot, but I'll just give a shout out. My guy Mike Bratton from that SEC podcast, saying that LSU is a bottom of the league team. I don't see it. I see a team that's
ridiculous.
I understand that, kind of like I talked about the deficiencies on the defensive line with Texas. I understand LSU lost some really good players there.
They've also got 14 starting offensive linemen back.
Kyron Lacey is really good. I mean, Mason Taylor is really good. From all reports, Garrett Nussmeier is a really good quarterback.
And their defense can't be worse.
No, absolutely. And that's the one right there. And Brian Kelly, people kind of were like, oh, wait a minute. Your defense kept you out of the college football playoff last year? Yeah. Because
100%
without that defense, they win at Ole Miss. They probably beat Alabama last year.
Yes.
And
100% they beat Alabama
and if you actually have a capable defensive scheme and good defensive backs, which Corey Raymond's back in Baton Rouge for that very reason, then you might win that Florida State game as well.
Yep.
So, I mean, no, it's 100% true that LSU got screwed by their defense last year. And look, for some of the games that they won last year, kind of like I was talking about with Texas, you've got to have those games that you're like, man, we were lucky to get out of there with one.
It's going to happen.
No, absolutely. And they had some of those too. But no, I think that probably if I had to pick them, I would pick them. I'll split the difference. I'll say third. I'll put them third.
You want to know where I have them?
Where do you have them?
Undefeated, going to Atlanta, losing a rematch with Georgia.
Okay, there you go. I'll tell you what. Somebody brought up the point last night.
Was it John Neighbors?
It might have been John Neighbors. It might have been, but somebody brought up the point that they could play 3 times next year.
They could.
That's nuts.
And it's very reasonable. Dan, appreciate it.
You're the
How can
best,
people
buddy.
get your stuff?
I'm sorry?
How can people get your stuff?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Dan Mathews HOU. That's 1 T in Matthews, at Dan Mathews HOU. Sports Talk 790 is also another way that you can find us on Twitter, and part of the A-Team, 3 to 6, with Adam Clanton, Adam Wexler, coming to you every day, drive time in Houston. So that's how you can find me.
It's Dan Mathews. Joined now by the Daily Wire superstar.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Formerly of I guess you're still the J-Boys show.
Yeah.
But
Still,
you'll always be that.
It'll always be that. It's still in my Twitter profile. It's so you can see the J-Boy. People always ask me, they're like, where did that name come from? It's just what they used to call me when the baseball team in high school. So
it was natural.
Yeah, it was natural.
It was natural.
It wasn't something that was I just woke up in the middle of the night one night. Like, oh God,
got to do that. That's my nickname.
They'll love this.
Can't nickname yourself.
Yeah. No.
But no, y'all, Daily Wire, Crain and Company, you and Cone and your brother Blaine just kind of hang out in a very nice studio for.
It's a good gig. Beats working in the steel mill, that's for sure.
That is true.
I did that
or in
summer.
junior college.
Oh, dude, I did that one summer.
Did you really?
Oh God, it was so bad. My father was one of those guys who's like, you're gonna work a summer job that's hard. So I would do construction. Literally, my freshman year of high school, while doing all the sports, my job on the construction site was to take the broken bricks in the wheelbarrow from each lot and take them over to the dumpster.
That sounds awful.
I don't know if there's a job that's like, there's nobody under. And that is the lowest of the totem pole. But
everybody is your superior.
I would take that a million times over working at the steel mill. It was so hot. Oh my God, just incredibly hot. It's Mordor. That's basically what it was.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. So let's talk a little Florida first.
Okay.
To me, I'm looking at Florida, I'm like, I don't buy him, then I'm kind of like, okay, maybe I should buy him, and then maybe I shouldn't, and then I'm looking at him now, I'm like, Billy might survive this, and they may be pretty damn good and still be 7-5.
Well, to me, Florida, it's like when you walk into the bar and you look and there's a girl you think's good looking that's way over there, and you can't make your mind up, and then you hear her talk and she's got a terrible voice, so you're like going back and forth on whether like you should do this or not. Because my question is, 7-5 is going to be very difficult with that schedule.
And those 5 losses, if they're good losses, that's a good year.
Does 7-5 save them though? Like, what's the number?
There's not one. Like, well, it is 7-5, but it's the 7 and the 5.
Yeah, it's what type of 7-5.
Yeah.
Now, I do think that the struggles that Billy has had is people kind of point at Florida and like laugh like it wasn't a real Muschamp. That's really not what's going on at Florida. I was talking with Jim Nagy, the executive director of the Senior Bowl. He said Florida may have the best D-line in the SEC. Like, they legitimately might. You look at
and one of the deepest.
You look at what Graham Mertz, the 2 quarterbacks last year that shocked me. Very rarely am I shocked. Talking about from a development standpoint and making such a big jump was Haynes King and Graham Mertz. Because Graham Mertz put some good stuff on tape in Wisconsin, but he
put some bad stuff on tape too.
So it shocked me how well they operated. But losing Ricky Pearsall that's going to hurt a lot more than I think people think. Look, Wilson's a hell of a player.
Yeah.
He's dynamic, but you got to have more than that because the defense, just like Auburn last year, defenses would line up against Auburn and say, you know what, we're going to take Rivaldo Fairweather away,
and we're
nobody else
done.
can get open,
And we're
that's
done.
it, and we're going to stop the run. So that
It's
Miami,
Occam's razor.
it really is. It really
Yeah.
is. So that Miami game week 1, I've said I think is worth 3 years for each program because only two things can happen. Either Florida is going to lose that game
And
it
fire
is gonna
everybody.
put them on
Yeah.
a downward trajectory because it is Miami and in-state team, or Florida's going to win that game, which is going to make Mario look awful because
Fire everybody.
everybody's been making fun
Yes,
of Florida.
exactly.
So that game, that opener is almost worth 3 years to me.
It is, and like that's one of those games where you talk about the importance of an event. Like I think the Elijah Moore pretending to pee like a dog in the Egg Bowl changed the state of Mississippi football for more than a decade. Miami versus Florida in Week 1 might be the exact same thing on a higher level.
And I agree with you. And Barrett, like, here's the way I look at Florida. What would we be saying Florida? What would we be thinking about Florida if they had Auburn's schedule? We'd probably be sitting there saying, look,
8-4,
8-4,
9-3 maybe.
But with that schedule, because it all goes into the calculus, right? It all goes into the math problem. The roster, the depth, the schedule, the coaches, and you look at that schedule, and I mean, your non-conference is Miami, UCF, at Florida State. I mean, goodness gracious, it's difficult. I said their schedule is like walking into your house and the lights are off, and you get jumped by a bunch of dwarfs with baseball bats. Like, It's just awful. Everywhere you turn, it hurts.
I was talking with Andy Staples about this. The On 3 set is right there. I was talking with Andy this morning after he got done with his show. And he said, we were talking about Florida, we were like, okay, 7-5, it depends on the 7-5. And I'm like, okay, but if they go that final stretch of a 5-game gauntlet after the bye week, and those are the 5, that means the first 7 are undefeated. But if they lose one of those games, that means they beat somebody down the stretch that they have no business beating. So it's like there's so many layers to Florida. It's the most fascinating team to me.
It is, because again, everything that's going into it. When you play the type of teams that they play as well, including UCF, with KJ Jefferson, they are downhill, downhill, downhill. These are physical games. Florida does have depth, but I mean, do they have enough? Now, another thing, Barrett, and this I was talking with Matt Moscone about this. I am wondering, now that the transfer portal is so crazy, let's say Billy Napier goes 6-6. Does it hinge on, guys, if we fire him, DJ Lagway's probably gone? Just like South Carolina. What if they go 5-7, and like if we fire Shane Beamer, Lenora Sellers
Everybody's
may
gone.
leave? So, like, at what point do you say, you know what, we're going to ride this out one more year? And then you look at Florida's schedule next year.
It's the same exact thing.
It's the exact same thing. So, like, what are you going to do? You're going to bring in a brand new guy after the roster gets wiped, because it will get wiped.
And it'll be like Colorado's roster.
And it will be a unmitigated. You will get that guy, whoever takes that job, which Florida's a great job, but there's not a lot of people that are safe and have built up a lot of equity that are going to walk into that situation with that schedule year one, and that be their first impression of Florida fans.
Well, and what's crazy too is that you can sit there, if you're a Florida fan or Florida president or AD, and you fire Billy Napier. Everybody within that organization will say, all right, we're going to be patient with the next guy, because like what you said will happen. Roster attrition, basically you're rebuilding from scratch. Okay, we'll be patient. And then after a year and a half, we're like, screw this.
Yeah.
We don't want to be patient anymore. We want to win titles.
Well, it used to be, and Barrett, you know this better than anybody, it used to be in college football, when you got a job, you had at least 3 years.
Yeah.
You had 3 recruiting cycles, which gives you time to get your players in to run your system, which gives you time to put your culture in the locker room, which gives you time to build your structure because you are a CEO of an organization.
Yeah.
Now I think it's 2. Now I think you got 2. And if one of those years, especially the second year, is an unmitigated disaster, you're fired. Mm-hmm. I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. Florida's so interesting. Okay, so you were surprised by Graham Mertz last year. I was floored by Graham Mertz. I think we've had this conversation before. What needs to change? How does he get even better?
Well, I think there's a ceiling on Graham Mertz.
He might have hit it. That's the thing. He might have hit it.
And you know what? That's great. Maxing out your potential is not a bad thing. I don't think he has to be Drew Brees or Dan Marino or any of that. He has to continue to make good decisions. What I'm worried about with Florida, and that was probably the thing that shocked me the most, because at Wisconsin, he turned the ball over a decent amount. And even if you go back and watch the tape, he put a lot of balls in harm's way. Like he
that COVID year especially.
Oh, all the time. But I think Florida's biggest problem, what needs to change is they've got to be more organized as in-game coaches. I'll give you a great example. All right, and we saw it multiple times throughout the year. But you go play Utah week 1 on the road.
Oh my God!
You go play them
two
week 1
numbers on the field at the same time.
You give up a 70-yard bomb on the first play because the third-string quarterback's there, and you thought they were going to run it. But then you answer. Right, you go down and you score a touchdown at 7-7.
And it looked fine.
You grab the momentum back. I'm sitting there watching that game. I'm like, these teams are pretty even.
Yeah.
Like, and Cam Rising's not playing. So then you get a 3 and out. So you're going to get the ball back. Everything is perfect. And I was a special teams coordinator at Division I level for 3.5 years. All right, you have a chart, your full depth chart, big. You see coaches walking around with the sheets and all this.
Yeah.
It literally has in color coded all the way 4 deep. I used to go 4 deep.
Yeah.
And you have the numbers on the sides, and you have a different color code for guys with the same numbers.
Yeah.
And typically it's red because you
can't have them together.
How that happens in that situation is absolutely unacceptable. But it wasn't just that. Look at the amount of times they jumped off sides in crucial situations. Look at the amount of just disorganization. It's one thing to lose because the other team is better than you and they just beat you. It's another thing to lose because you were unorganized during the game. And I think that's what scares Florida fans, the ones that know when they're watching the game, what's going on. It looks disorganized, and you cannot win. You cannot operate a Fortune 500 company. You cannot be build a great organization or a great business or win in athletics if you are not organized when you're at the highest level.
And it's crazy too, because I thought Billy was. At Louisiana, I was like, this guy's awesome. He totally gets it. He's worked in the SEC. He's gone out west. He has success at a reasonably high level as a head coach. He'll be able to handle that.
He will.
And he didn't.
No, and he didn't. And look, the buck does stop with the head coach. You can sit here and say, well, Billy Napier's not the special teams. You hired the special teams guy.
Yeah.
That's your guy. You're the head coach. You get paid the most money. You got the biggest buyout. You're the one that gets to do all the media events and all the shine and all the stuff around the town. So the buck does stop with you. So if Florida does not get organized, Barrett, with that schedule, that plus just not being as good as some of the teams that can play could tank it. Like, if there's anything that's going to just, the Titanic's going down and Florida fans just sitting there playing the violin on the deck of the ship, just sitting there watching it, I think the disorganization may be the thing that would be the final straw to get Billy Napier.
It's going to be wild. I'm rooting for Florida. I did my SEC, home at schedule wins and losses.
Yeah.
They ended up 7-5 on my list. I'm like, how the hell did that happen?
Well, I never root for anybody to get fired. Well, outside of Brian Harsin. But I hope he turns it around, just like I hope Sam Pittman figures it out, just like I hope Shane Beamer figures it out. But there's a problem. It's impossible for all of them probably to figure it out because everybody plays everybody. So somebody's going down this year. I think it's going to be Sam Pittman in Arkansas. But Billy Napier, that's what the disorganization is what surprised me.
It's very disappointing because I thought better. All right. Last night, in our email inboxes, we have our predicted order of finish ballots. Who do you have in the SEC championship game? Who do you have in the playoff out of the SEC?
All right, so I do want to preface it with this. I don't make my final predictions till after fall camp because I need to know who wins what job, who gets hurt, and who gets arrested because we still got quarterback battle, and what's going to happen in Georgia, who knows? I would say right now, though, because we have to do it here, I think Georgia plays Ole Miss twice.
Really?
I think Georgia.
I love that you're on board with the Ole Miss hype.
Oh, dude,
I am too. Not that level, though.
The thing that scares me about Ole Miss is I don't know how they're going to handle being the big dog now, because they've always, you've had expectations and high expectations. They won 11 games last year, but now there's legitimate reason for them to have a chance to win an SEC championship, which they haven't, Barrett. They haven't won the SEC championship, in the game. They won the West, I think, with LSU in 2003, but LSU went and played in the SEC championship. So I think Georgia and Ole Miss, right now, not final, will play twice.
I love it.
And in the playoff, I've got Georgia, I've got Ole Miss, I've got Texas.
I like it. I have those three. I have Texas over Georgia in the regular season, and then they flip it in the SEC championship game. Georgia and Texas in, Ole Miss in, Alabama on sort of landscape watch, so to speak.
I mean, is that what we're calling it now? Or are we calling
I guess
it the
we're calling it the bubble. Yeah.
Don't we got to come up with something different? Like, there's no way we can call it the Final Four.
No, we can't call it the Final Four.
But do we need to come up with a different term?
Yeah, we do.
We need to figure that out.
Greg's back there. We can ask him.
We'll ask him.
He's Jay Crain. Where can people find you? Your excellent work.
Oh, I appreciate it. Well, if you like Barrett's show, I'm sure you're going to like ours. It's Crain and Company. Just go to YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. It's Crain and Company. It's me, former Michigan quarterback David Cohn.
Superstar quarterback.
Yeah. Everybody thinks he's the pitcher. Like he says, I'd never pitch for the Mets. But my brother played with Austin Eckler at Western State, Colorado. You can find us. We're live 2 to 3:30 p.m. Central each weekday. Do live calls, have a live chat. We got a lot of fun. You like old school sports shows? That's us.
Jake, appreciate it.
Barrett to the man. Smothered and covered. I feel smothered and covered.
With knowledge.
With knowledge.
With knowledge.
Yeah, make sure and add that caveat.
Brian Hadad.
Barrett Saleh.
Sports Talk Mississippi.
Smothered and covered.
We're gonna. We have a long history with my show.
This was you were the main guy, but I was in terminology I was the producer. And
That's true.
You sent it to me, and I clipped it up, and we sent it out, and it was
a great show.
It was as
we
good
had what
an SEC
we had
football.
8,000 subscribers.
Yes.
In 2018.
It was as good an SEC football podcast as there was, and we were.
I would say it's one of the first.
We were 10 years ahead of the game.
We were,
and
we haven't been paid for 10 years either.
That ain't never happened. If we ever get paid, we're taking a trip together.
Yeah. And we're
we'll
going to go to a casino, and
Yes.
it's going to be free money. It's going to be incredible. It's going to be incredible. So
but for real, because I know people give you crap. I'm so glad this podcast is back. It's a great podcast.
I appreciate that.
And I'm glad Smothered and Covered. It's a great name, too.
It is. Still working on that Waffle House sponsor. But
we'll make it happen.
Yeah, so it's Mississippi State Day.
It is.
Which means we have to talk about how much I hate Mississippi State.
Hate them.
I absolutely. It's not that I hate Mississippi State.
It's
that I hate you and every specific fan. All of you.
Even my cousin Steven?
No, I like Steven.
Okay.
No, I like Steven. I don't, especially those guys on Twitter that like think that I have some personal
Dog
like
69 420?
Yeah.
Yes. That guy?
Yeah. And about everybody else too.
Yeah.
But Jeff Levy is here now.
Yes.
He's walking around somewhere. He's
He's
supposed to go to your desk.
He's easy to spot. That's a big dude.
He's. Yes.
I don't think people realize how big he is. He's a former offensive tackle.
Yeah, I didn't realize it.
Yeah,
I mean, I've seen him before.
He signed with Oklahoma out of high school.
I understand why.
Yeah, big man.
What changes? Does anything change?
Yeah. Well, in terms of from last year to this year, yes. State will be better offensive. Now, they couldn't be much worse offensively.
And well, Blake's there, and Blake's decent. Like,
Blake's a good quarterback.
He's not going to knock your socks off.
Yeah.
But he's going to do all right.
And the thing with Will from a season ago is we learned that Will Rogers is a system quarterback.
100%.
You put him in the air raid, and he'll thrive. He'll be fine there. I don't know what he's going to do at Washington. I don't know what
he's going to throw ground balls like he did at Mississippi State.
I'm worried about that.
No, like, honestly, like people are like, "Oh my God, Will Rogers at Washington, he's going to be awesome." I'm like, did you not watch Will Rogers last year?
It was rough.
It was bad.
And he battled a lot of injuries. And he's a tough kid. And I like Will, but he's an air raid quarterback.
Sure,
no
100%.
Blake Shapen in this offense has the tools and has the ability to be successful. And when you look at Levy through the years, when he's been offensive coordinator, Dylan Gabriel at Central Florida, and then again at Oklahoma, Matt Corral. I mean, Corral ends up being a super talented guy, but in 2020, we didn't know that coming into the season. We knew he had some tools, but he ends up being a great player. Elijah Moore was a player, he was more famous for raising his leg in the end zone than anything else.
Which changed the trajectory of Mississippi football forever.
Yes.
Which is still so freaking funny.
But nobody
knew. The dude pretended to pee like a dog.
Yeah. The Egg Bowl deserves games like that.
So, the Egg Bowl gets a lot of games like that.
So, but nobody knew, like, the next year he was going to have a better season than A.J. Brown or Dante Moncrief or Laquan Treadwell ever had at Ole Miss.
Yeah.
And he did it all against SEC opponents.
Yeah.
In 9 games, he had 86 catches. This offense makes stars.
Yeah.
So, there's a guy on State's roster right now, and I can't tell you who it is, I don't know, that's going to catch 60, 70 passes this year for close to 1,000 yards. If Shapen is healthy, he should throw for 32, 3,300 yards and 25, 30 touchdowns. The problem for State is going to be stopping people.
Yes, which generally is part of the equation. And I don't know if they can do it.
State through the years has always been a team that's been defensive first.
Sure.
They've always had great defenses. This year, they have a lot of question marks. And I'm being really generous when I say they have a lot of question marks. On that side of the ball, the comparison I keep making over and over again is Levy and Kiffin's first year at Ole Miss. That's one of the worst defenses in college football history. They couldn't stop anybody.
And all they had to be was adequate.
If they had been adequate, they might have won the national title.
The bar was that low, and
But
they still couldn't reach
He
it.
took a team that averaged, I think, 23, 24 points a game, and they averaged 39 points a game against an all SEC schedule. It was insane.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying State's going to average 40 points a game, but if they're averaging 31, 32 points per game,
It's fine.
they're going to be fine.
Yeah.
So it's two things this year for State. A bowl would be great. If they can get to 6
I think it'd be
wins,
tremendous.
you would feel great. It'd be like Mullen's first year.
Yeah.
They missed the bowl game, but they played two top 25 non-conference
Right,
teams.
but that set the
bar.
foundation.
And
It's
the
like,
other
okay,
thing was-
this is the floor.
Just seeing the difference offensively. Mullen's first year, coming from Sylvester Croom to Mullen, you were like, all right, they're going to be better. You can see where they're going. And the same thing can be true here. If they come in and Levy's offense looks like Levy's offense, they're going to be fine long term.
You know what's crazy? And I was thinking about this while you were talking. 6-6 a bowl game would be fine.
Yeah.
It's almost the same thing at Florida. Think about that. Think about that. Florida's here today too. But getting back to Mississippi State, I want to talk about the NIL collective stuff because I always when the NIL rules changed, I thought, okay, places like Starkville, Lincoln, Nebraska, like they have a chance to really succeed because of the tight-knit community that really, really, really wants you to win and have been starved. It hasn't evolved that way.
Right.
You have these collectives, multi-million-dollar collectives, and Mississippi State, just from a financial perspective, is not what
Right.
Texas is or Alabama, whatever.
Right.
Jeff Levy's biggest strength is organizing that.
Yeah.
What have you seen in terms of the changes with the collectives and how Mississippi State is sort of operating now?
You know that in the state of Mississippi, everything is it's skewed through the egg bowl, right?
Really?
Yes. So, and you've seen Ole Miss and the incredible success they've had in the transfer portal, and it's led people to think that State is just not doing well on the NIL front, which is not
true.
State has done.
It's
very
not.
well.
It's not where. It's not where an SEC. Well, other SEC teams, and it's not where it needs to be. But they're all right.
It's good.
Yeah.
It's good enough. I mean, especially from State's offense this year, of the starting 11, 8 of them will probably come from this transfer class.
Yeah.
They didn't come for free.
No.
If you want to look at basketball, State signed, I think, one of the number 2 or 3 transfer class in the country.
Yeah.
They've got the cash. That's not an issue. They got off to a slow start. John Cohen, when he was at State, did not embrace NIL the correct way. He really wanted to focus on baseball more than anything else, which is just
Y'all are doing all right there.
We're doing fine there. So when Zach Selman took over, and then they finally got the NIL going with the Bulldog Initiative, and basically it's one man you have to think. His name's Charlie Winfield. He's the head of the Bulldog Initiative, who basically just one day decided, I'm tired of State being behind. I'm going to do something. And
This kind of sucks.
And organized State's collective and took it from there. Now they're at a point where they can be competitive with anybody they want to be. I feel like this year they didn't have any success in the transfer portal on the defensive side of the ball. I think more of that is because transfers who only have a year to play didn't want to put themselves in a position with Coleman Hutzler where they didn't know anything about the guy. I don't know anything about the guy. You cover college football. How much do you really know about Coleman Hutzler?
Not much.
So,
but I don't know a lot of things.
That's true. It's true.
Ask Mississippi State message board
I mean,
posters.
But that said, there was this a distrust of, I don't know this guy and I don't want to spend my last year doing that, and it's part of a rebuild. I think if Hutzler goes out and just shows that, again, being competent and looking like an SEC defense at times, they'll be much more successful next year.
Sure.
So from a collective standpoint, State's in a pretty good spot. Everybody could have more money.
Sure.
But right now, Mississippi State's in a spot where they can compete in the SEC in the collective world.
Moving forward, no divisions.
Yeah.
Texas and Oklahoma now here. Has Mississippi State's expectations within the program, has it been recalibrated? And what is the ceiling now?
So I have always said for State, and I believe this for Ole Miss too, but Ole Miss has kind of broken away from this now these past few years. They're going for a third 10-win season in 4 years.
That's insane.
Unprecedented success. And it's got to give Kiffin all the credit in the world.
Ole Miss lover.
Don't even. So for State, I look at things in terms of cycles. In a 5-year span, I think State should be 3 of those 5 years a 7-8 win team.
Okay.
They can find a way to go 500 in the conference and win 4 non-conference games, and they're good. You have 1 year where you lose a lot of guys and you're down, and you're 6-6, and you might be 5-7. You might be.
Yeah.
And then 1 year, everything should click right for Mississippi State, and they're in the college football playoff discussion. They can be a 10-win team.
Okay.
Now, State has had this cycle has existed for State. They've missed the big years the last 2 times. It was 2018. That 2018 team, where Mullen leaves and Moorhead comes in, you know that team was built to win 10 games. They had the number 1 defense in the country, Fitzgerald at quarterback. And
everything was set up, right?
And they decided they wanted to throw the ball all over the field with Nick Fitzgerald. If Mullen had stayed...
I still have no idea why they wanted to do that.
If Mullen had stayed, they would have won 10 games.
Sure.
Right? There's no doubt in my mind. And then last year, he brought back a ton of guys, and you're coming off of a 9-win season, you're going to be in good shape, and then Mike Leach passes away.
Right.
And then Zach Arnett decides, I don't want to run the air raid anymore, and everything falls apart. Last year's team was built to be a 9 or 10-win team and be, where Ole Miss was, State could have been there, too.
If Mike Leach was there.
If Mike Leach had been there, they would have won 9 or 10 games.
I agree.
But so State has missed that up year, and that's tough on fans, especially when you see Ole Miss, and they've had 3 of the last 4 years now. They've been right there. State needs to have that up year. It's not this year, obviously.
No, yeah.
But can it be maybe next year or the 2 years after that? Next year's going to be tough because your home schedule is going to be Georgia and Texas and Tennessee.
Yeah.
And those are not games you want to play anywhere.
Not
but
at all.
Playing at home, it's going to be tough. They can find their way to being in the college football playoff discussion, not this year, but with Jeff Lebby and bringing a more innovative and a more modern approach to offensive football to Mississippi State, the path is there for State to be a team that can be competitive year in and year out.
Hey, Dad, appreciate it.
Anytime.
We
screwed that
bro
up.
Hug. Bro hug.
Oh, yeah.
Bro hug.
I'm in. Read for the real thing.
Now, whoever's watching or listening,
yeah,
if you know a guy named Keith who used to own a podcast company,
we're looking for him.
I mean, he owes us a lot of money. A lot of money.
A lot.
Pay up. That will wrap it up for this edition of College Football Smothered and Covered. Appreciate you guys checking out the show. Of course, we are brought to you by Bet Online. Use promo code BLEAV, BLEAV, and you will get $50 deposit bonus added to your deposit of up to $250. Day 4 coming up tomorrow. Until then, have a great day, everybody.